morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right, we're going to give just a few seconds for people to come on in. Come on in. Good morning, Lady Barbara. Good morning, Lady Latanya. Good morning to Beloved. Good morning to those of you who are coming in. Happy morning, man. I woke up and I wasn't pushing up daisies on the other side, so I am thankful. Good morning. I tell you, it is a wonderful thing when you have friends that maybe you haven't heard from in a while, and they just all of a sudden call you, or they text you, or they Facebook inbox you and say, hey, you're on my mind. I've been praying for you. Is there anything serious going on? And I'm like, yes, as a matter of fact, there is. You can add me to your prayer list more specifically, and they do that. So it is always a blessing for me when people say that they're praying for me, interceding for me, because I do it for everybody all the time. I just don't broadcast it. But sometimes as a person who intercedes a lot, sometimes you do wonder, hey, is anybody out there praying for me? So I just want to say thank you to those of you who are already praying for me. As you all know, I'll be going offline from Thursday to probably next Wednesday. I'll probably come back on, and we'll restart the broadcast then. But you all know that I'll be offline for a little bit, just taking care of my health and moving forward on my health journey. And I'll share with you all once the procedure is done, how it went and all of that. But I just thank God for another day of life. It is Teachable Tuesday. And most of you all already know that we take our Tuesdays to teach specifically on the history of Blacks, and on the history of African Americans, and on the history of the Negro. All of those terms, right, that America has chosen for us. The history of the Aboriginal American, that's another one. The history of the Native American. So we take our Tuesdays to dig into all of those kinds of things. So if you've been joining us on Tuesdays and you're wondering, man, why are they always talking about Black people? Well, that's because every Tuesday I take out time, and that is my focus on issues that concern Black community, issues that concern Black people, issues about race, police brutality, all of those kinds of issues. But right now we've been focused in on two things. We've been focused in on reading Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust. And we're going to end our reading in Dick Gregory's book today, because I do want you to get the book. So that's why I'm not going to read it to you in its entirety. I did finish it a couple of days ago myself, but it is just full of wisdom, full of insight. If you are a music person and you really like to study the history of music in America, he gives lots of insight into music in America, and he talks in really good detail about the early jazz movement. He talks about R&B, he talks about a lot of different things. So we're going to be going through today and just reading sections that I feel are important for me to share out loud, and then we're going to encourage you to pick up Dick Gregory's book. I believe local libraries have it now, so also check your local library out. I know a lot of times when I'm interested in books, I try to figure out if my local library has it first, and that way I have enough time to read the book and preview the book to see if I want to add it to my personal library. That being said, I want to talk to you about some more books that we're going to continue to add into our Tuesdays as we continue to phase other books out. So some of the books, and you can screenshot these, that we'll be reading through for the rest of this season for Daring Dialogues. We have The Cross and the Lynching Tree by James Cone. The Cross and the Lynching Tree. and it's talking about the relationship between Christian theology and how African Americans were treated. All right. And it's a very, very, very detailed book. I like to read books that are written by scholars and experts in the field. Why? Because there's so much information online and so much information on the internet that, you know, is not necessarily proven information. So you can't really go wrong if you are getting in and digging and reading and doing the work. It is, Lakia. It's a very, very powerful book. So we're going to be reading through The Cross and the Lynching Tree. All right. So you can get an understanding of how Christian theology shaped what was happening to Black Americans. And gosh, I probably need to go over, get it and show it to you all. But yeah, let me do that. 1 second. All right. But we just finished watching, and I got this from my local library. I was like, wow, my local library is woke. We got this from our local library, which I was surprised that it had this in the local library. It's Hidden Colors 3, The Rules of Racism. And the whole Hidden Color series is available on Amazon. But like I said, again, these are things that you can go and see if your local library has first before you invest in the product and decide whether or not you want it. All right. This particular video by Tariq Nasheed, a lot of people know who he is. He's kind of on the, what can I say? He's kind of on the African consciousness side. He's not a Christian. He's not a believer. But he put together this documentary that has different scholars talking about the history of racism. And they go through and they show you the historical documentation around it. And one of the people in the video, very well-known Dr. Joy DeGruy, she spoke of this particular incident where she was at a book signing. She was signing her books, and it hit me so hard because she said a group of police officers came up to her during her book signing, and they gave her a set of images of lynchings of Black men. And at first she said she didn't really look at the images and pay attention to them until they told her, no, these are contemporary lynchings. And they showed some of the images in the film, and you can see in the images that these men have their hands tied behind their back and they were lynched. Okay. And the officer said something very important. He said they're not reporting these as lynchings. He said they're reporting them as suicides. But you could see in the images that they gave her that it was very clear that these men were lynched. And so people think that lynching doesn't happen anymore, but it's still happening. And so that's why we're going to be looking into this book here. All right. The series Hidden Colors, I believe he has 4 of them now. It's Hidden Colors 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this was Hidden Colors 3 that I got from the library. And it's called The Rules of Racism. All right. Very, very powerful documentary. We're going to be looking at the mind of the South. All right. I had to go digging to get some of these books because they're not in your local bookstore anymore. I wonder why. The Mind of the South is it's a scholarly work about looking at Southerners and those who live on both sides of what is called the Mason-Dixon line. It's talking about how Southerners think, how people thought during this particular time period of Jim Crow and all of that. All right, we're going to be looking at the strange career of Jim Crow. MLK during his time called this the historical Bible of the civil rights. Okay, where they go in and they're talking about all of the Jim Crow laws and things that were put into place. Again, this is not a book you can find in your local bookstore. So you have to get online, you have to order it, you have to dig for it. But I am going to be reading from it so that you all can get some of the information. Here's another one. Cannot find it at your local bookstore. Matter of fact, when I went in asking for this book or trying to look for it, the lady looked at me really, really strangely. And this book is called The Iceman Inheritance: Prehistoric Sources of Western Man's Sexism, Racism, and Aggression. So clearly this is not something that, I'm holding it up there so you can screenshot. This is clearly not something that people want out in the mainstream market, okay? But we're going to be reading from it. You already know about sundown towns, okay? A lot of people are now starting to talk about sundown towns where African Americans were not allowed to be outside after dark, all right? And that's one of the things he talks about in that documentary, that there is a historical reason, okay, why in the black neighborhood your parents would say, by the time the street lights come on, you better be in the house, okay? That had a historical reference to it. Let's see. I also talked to you all already about Stamped from the Beginning by Ibram Kendi, about where the racist ideas came from. He basically has an anthology on it, documenting where these racist ideas came from. And then a book I got a chance to preview already is 30 Days a Black Man, okay? And this is the forgotten story that exposed the Jim Crow South, all right? Kind of like an investigative piece where someone actually went in being a black man, and he exposed what was going on in the Jim Crow South. So again, okay, when people see me online and I'm talking about certain things and I'm making comments, I'm not making them off the top of my head. I know. It's great to assume that people are making stuff off the top of their head and they're not doing the study and they're not doing the reading and they're not doing the research. I totally get it. But I'm not one of those people. All right. So as I was meditating this morning and just praying to God, he began to speak something to me that I'm probably going to have to dig into some more. But I want to leave these thoughts with you because of what we're talking about today. All right. And one of the things he said to me just out of the blue is he said, the fears of black people have traceable roots. Somebody type that. The fears of black people have traceable roots. Now, when God drops statements on you, I hope that you all actually write them down. Okay? When you are going about your day and the Holy Spirit starts speaking to you, I hope that you write it down, or you text it to yourself, or you email it to yourself. Yes, Prophet, if you can do it on there, that would be great. He said the fears of black people have traceable roots. I said, okay, God, you're going to have to give me some more. What do you mean by the fears of black people have traceable roots? He said, when you look at the things that black people are afraid of, you can actually trace it back to an origin. You can trace it back to something that actually happened collectively to black people that has instilled a fear in them. And he gave me 3 examples, which means now that he's given me the examples, I'm gonna go have to do some more study. God loves to give homework assignments, by the way. So if you're gonna hang out with God, just know he's gonna give you homework to do, okay? The first one he gave me was, he said, black people have a fear of saving. They have a fear of investing, a fear of saving and investing. And so they have to break that fear. They have to break past that mental barrier of saving and investing money. Okay, and so I said, okay, where did that come from? So I started typing, black people and money, black people and savings, history. And I came up with Freedmen's Bank. Freedmen's Bank. right after the period of blacks being freed from slavery and all of that, they came up with a bank called Freedmen's Bank. And one of the board members of this bank was Frederick Douglass. Lots of black people, thousands of black people, put their money in this bank. Then the bank closed, and all of that money that was put in there disappeared. Nobody knows to this day what happened to those people's money. Everything that they had saved to that point was put in that bank because they were trying to start a black bank. The bank closed down, money disappeared, and nobody ever found out what happened to the money. So you're talking about several hundred families affected and their money stolen from them, and they never found out what happened to the money. That creates a fear of saving and investing, because if I cannot trust and I cannot guarantee where my money is going, and that's all I have literally saved up and it's all gone, then I'm going to be fearful of trying to do that particular investment again. And it was supposed to be a black bank. All right, you can look it up, Freedmen's Bank. And so when you ask, why does grandma have her mattress stuffed with money? Okay, why does grandma have money stuck and tucked in books and Bibles? That's what I grew up with. Why does Big Mama have her money always at her chest? Okay, and anytime you needed some money, all Big Mama had to do. Exactly. Why did they put it in mason jars? Why did they put it in tin cans from, you think it's cookies in there, but you lift the lid as a kid and you see stacks and stacks of money? That's why. There was a fear instilled in saving and investing and putting your money, especially in non-African American institutions. There was a fear instilled that if you put your money there, you may not get it back. Something may happen in the system and oopsie daisy, we've lost your life savings. All right. The fear of building and developing community. The fear of building and developing community is number 2. The fear of building and developing community. Why is that fear there? Black Wall Street, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Most people by now have heard of Black Wall Street, but if you have not heard of Black Wall Street, please go and research it and look it up. This was a thriving community of black people minding their own businesses. They had schools, they had hospitals, they had restaurants, all of that. And jealous white people burnt it to the ground. They came up with a reason. They accused one black man in the town at the time, I believe, of attacking a white woman. The white mobs came in. They started beating up the black people. The black people were fighting back and winning. And then our government dropped bombs on them. All right. Seneca Village. Seneca Village was a place in New York that is now Central Park. Seneca Village used to be a freed black person's village where everybody came together. People were prospering. Everybody was doing well. They were in community. Then the people around them started disparaging the village. They started labeling it as a shanty town. And then I believe the governor or the mayor at the time declared that Seneca Village would become what they call eminent domain. That's when the government takes over your land. And that's how Central Park came to be. Inside of Central Park, there is a real Egyptian obelisk, an ancient Egyptian obelisk in Central Park. All right. So again, Arlington Cemetery, if you don't know, Arlington Cemetery is built on top of a slave society of slaves that moved into that particular area. Arlington Cemetery was built on top of it. Move those people right on out. So when you talk about building and development, there is a fear there that has to be broken. But again, God said to me, it's not that these fears don't have a foundation or a reality base behind them. So when you see black people who are fearful of saving and investing, or they have serious reservations about it, you have to go back to our history. When you see black people who are having reservations about business, building community, building developments to come together with black people, and they have serious reservations about it, you have to look at our history. What has happened when we've tried to build and come together? Who comes along and undermines it? That's what you have to look at. And the third one he gave me was fear of medicine and doctors. Fears around medicine and doctors. Remember, with Black Wall Street, they had their own hospitals and their own doctors. But that wasn't always the case around the country. So, number 3, fears of medicine and doctors. Fears of medicine and doctors. Now, I know with my family did a lot of natural-based remedies. They know how, my grandmothers knew how to use herbs and stuff like that in order to heal the body. My grandmother, who's still living, is a full-blooded Cherokee, and she was a nurse. And so she knew a lot about how to heal the body naturally. So a lot of stuff in my family, we didn't go to the doctor a lot because grandmother just hooked up whatever she needed to hook up and applied it to us, and we did well. We got well. But everybody didn't have that. It doesn't have that experience. So where does this fear come from with medicine and doctors? There's a book out called Medical Apartheid that goes through the history of how black people have been experimented on in this country. If you have heard the story or seen the movie or read the book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, they were taking this woman's cells without her knowledge, without her family's knowledge, and they were keeping her cell, and they were doing research and coming up with all these solutions of healing for other people. They still haven't found anything for sickle cell yet, though. How ironic. They were finding all these cures for other people based on her cells. All right. Tuskegee experiment. What they did to black men for 40 years. 1932 to 1972. 40 years of experimenting on black men, giving them a disease, and then not telling them they gave them the disease, only so they could watch what the disease did to their bodies. And you wonder why black people do not trust doctors. Organ trafficking. Missing black people. And then the parents go and check out the bodies after they've finally been released from the coroner. And they see all these X marks all over the body from organ removal. So again, this is what God told me. The fears of black people have traceable roots. They have traceable roots. But guess what? God is greater than our fears. And so if you have any fears today in any of those areas, saving, investing, building and development, medical and healthcare, I pray today that the Spirit of the Lord release liberty in your life, release liberty in your mind, release liberty in your thinking, and that the spirit of fear would be broken off of you and your family and your generations and your children's 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 children to 1,000 generations, that they would not operate in fear surrounding these areas, and that you would be able to save and invest so that your seed and your children's children will be blessed, that you'll be able to operate in building and development, that you'll be able to come together with people in your community so that you can build and develop, and that you will be in good health and prosper even as your soul prospers. So I know that just took up half of my time, but I know you all understand. Moving right along. All right. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit has said. And he that hath an ear, let him be healed in the areas of his life that he needs to be healed in. I receive it for myself today too. Glory. All right. So let me deal with, since we're going to continue in Christopher Columbus, we can continue this next week, Lord willing, after the break. Let's go ahead and look at Dick Gregory's book. Solidarity. Solidarity. Free people, F-R-E-E, free people are the ones with enough money to control the information the rest of us get. That's what Dick Gregory says. A white boy told me in the 1960s, man, the worst dude on the planet is a liberal. I didn't say anything. He explained, yeah, a right-winger decides he's going to kill you. He takes his children to school every day, and he goes by the coffee shop and blows his brains out if a black person comes in the door because he can't stand to see the place integrated. But see, when a liberal decides he's going to kill you, he sees you go to a football game every Saturday and says, let's blow up the stadium. I don't know if this is true or pure crazy talk. Normally, I would research a statement like this, but not this time. Seems like his head is a little messed up. All white folks have to do is take a gorilla and spruce him up, and we black folks buy it. For instance, Bobby Kennedy was no good. No good. You only think he was good because you don't know. Remember Senator Joe McCarthy from Wisconsin? Bobby was his aide. He was the one that was digging up all the dirt on everybody during the Red Scare about Russia. That was Bobby. Americans are so fixated on the Kennedy glamour, even black folks. We can't get trapped by what is not real. We can't believe in others. We have to believe in black solidarity. The point is, we can have help from other people, including white folks, but we can't rely on them. We have to organize ourselves. We've done so in the past, and we need to do it again. In this section, I highlight ways in which blacks have organized and produced great outcomes. W.E.B. Du Bois, Booker T. Washington, and the Atlanta Compromise. Here's something that might seem strange. At the same time that some white folks were making things very tough for black people in the South, other white folks couldn't throw money at black people fast enough. Most of the money had to do with education. Some of the rich folks giving out all the money, the philanthropists, did it partly out of the goodness of their hearts. Some of them were church folks and just trying to do their Christian duty. But some of them, especially the ones in the North, figured it this way. If folks in the South, including black folks, got enough education to get good jobs, they could begin to pay their fair share of taxes. With half of what goes on in life, if you dig down to the bottom to see what it's all about, you find money. With the other half, you find sex. But that's a different story. Here's how strange it was. After slavery came a dozen years of Reconstruction, and it seemed like a new day for black people in the South. Because there were federal troops ensuring our rights, blacks could vote and run for office with little trouble. And there were even black senators and congressmen down south. Then came the presidential election of 1876. It was a close one. It looked like the Democrat Samuel Tilden had more votes in the Electoral College than the Republican Rutherford B. Hayes. Somebody said otherwise because the vote in a few states was so close that nobody knew who the state's electoral votes were going to go to. There wasn't a presidential election like that again until 124 years later when George W. Bush ran against Al Gore in 2000, and we know that was a close race. Finally, the Democrats said, okay, look here. You can have the election, no problem. You just have to do us one favor. Take these federal troops out of the South. You know, the ones y'all have down here making sure that black people can vote and get elected to office. Let us deal with black people our way. The Republicans said, cool. And that's how the Compromise of 1877 happened. Rutherford B. Hayes became president, and just about the very first thing he did was remove the troops from the South. And just like that, Reconstruction was over. Now here's the strange part. Rutherford B. Hayes, the dude who became president on the condition that he pull federal troops out of the South and end Reconstruction, this same dude later helped run a fund that helped a dozen schools train black teachers. Isn't that crazy? Even after the government pulled the federal troops out of the South, and even after blacks got chased out of Congress, which they did, okay, with white dudes in hoods 2 steps behind them, and even when some black people were getting locked up just for looking white people in the eye, while all of that was happening, black people were going to school. If they couldn't do anything else for them, poor black parents were at least able to send their kids to school. One of those little kids was young Booker T. Washington. He was born in Virginia in 1856 as a slave. Then, after emancipation, he went to school at Hampton Institute, which is now Hampton University in Virginia. That school was run by General Samuel Chapman Armstrong, and that's who gave old Booker T the main idea that he didn't let go of for the rest of his life. It was all about work. If you were working, you were staying out of trouble. The more work you did, the better you got at it. The better you got, the more money you made, and the prouder you felt. The prouder you felt, the more you stayed out of trouble because you didn't want to mess it all up doing some low-down, dirty mess. The more money you made, the more property you would have. The more property you had, the more you would have to keep and protect. So the harder you work. For Booker T, it all started and ended with work. Booker T. Washington believed that for black folks in the South, which is where most of them were at the time, the key was to find work that white people needed done. That way, black people would be useful to others, and when other people needed you, you survived. Not just that, if black folks showed white folks we could work and be trusted, and if we proved our presence was good enough for white people, the whites might just let up on us and treat us like ordinary human beings instead of animals. What kind of work did white folks need done? Farming, manual labor, stuff like that. So Booker T was all for blacks getting educated as long as we got taught to do practical stuff. And this is where your home ec came in. This is where your shop classes came in. What do they call it? Can't think of the term for it right at this second. But anyway, this is trade. This is where all of your trade education came in schools and vocational training. General Armstrong recommended Booker T to head up the Tuskegee Institute, a school in Alabama for black folks that got started in the 1880s. Booker T ran Tuskegee for the rest of his life. It gave his ideas a spotlight. He thought the most important thing was for blacks to get themselves together economically, and he was right. Racial equality, fighting for voting rights, integrating with white people, the way Booker T saw it, all of that could wait. It was more important to work and establish an economic base for your life. Now, I'm going to say Booker T was right, because here we are 50, 60, 100 years later, because this was in the 1880s, over 100 years later, here we are, and that economic base is still needing to be established. You'd best believe white people ate that stuff up. Why wouldn't they have? They didn't have to change anything they were doing, and black people were going to help them. In 1895 in Georgia, Booker T gave a famous talk that was known afterward as the Atlanta Compromise speech. He said about blacks and whites, quote, "In all things that are purely social, we can be as separate as the 5 fingers, yet one as the hand in all things essential to mutual progress." White people clapped at that till they couldn't feel their hands. Washington told blacks in the South that they should forget about going somewhere else to make a new start. They had opportunities right where they were. He said, and I quote, "To those of my race who depend upon bettering their condition in a foreign land, or who underestimate the importance of cultivating friendly relations with the Southern white man, I would say, cast down your bucket where you are. Make friends in every manly way of people of all races by whom we are surrounded. Cast it down in agriculture, mechanics, in commerce, domestic service, and in the professions." You have to give Booker T. Washington his due. What he was saying made some sense, even if you didn't agree with it. Of course, now, it probably won't surprise you to hear that not all black people saw things the way he did. Some black folks heard what he was saying about doing what white folks needed done, and they said, man, forget that. The 14th Amendment says, I'm a citizen. If I'm a citizen, then I have rights, and I should be able to do whatever I want. Forget about trying to do what the white folks need. That mess ended with slavery, or should have. Why have I got to try to be useful to the white man just so he won't treat me worse than he treats a dog? I've got my own life to think about. I need to be able to vote. That's my right as a citizen. If I want to spend my life studying philosophy or French or art history, I need to be able to do that. What I want doesn't have a thing to do with the white man. One brother who felt this way was William Edward Burghardt Du Bois, W.E.B. for short. He was born in Massachusetts in 1868. Talk about a black man getting educated. After he got a degree at Fisk University, Du Bois went overseas to study in Berlin, then returned and became the first black person to get a PhD from Harvard. That man had brains coming out of his ears. One of Du Bois' books is The Souls of Black Folks. The Souls of Black Folk, which you need to read if you haven't. Du Bois didn't like what Booker T. Washington was saying, and not just because he thought black people should be able to do whatever we wanted. The way Du Bois saw it, if all you told black people to do was work, and work some more, you were making them into machines instead of people. Hard to say he was wrong, just like it was hard to say Booker T. was wrong. In an essay called The Talented Tenth, Du Bois wrote, "If we make money the object of man training, we shall develop money makers, but not necessarily men. If we make technical skill the object of education, we may possess artisans, but not in nature men. Men shall have only, as we make manhood the object of the work of the schools, intelligence, broad sympathy, knowledge of the world that is and was, and of the relation of men to it. This is the curriculum of that higher education that must underlie true life." So, during that time, people basically began to break out into 2 different camps of thought. There was some black people who gravitated completely toward Booker T. Washington's ideas of working, make sure you build economy. If you have to work and do things that white people want done, get it done so that you can make the money and solidify your economic base. Then there were people who said, nah, we're not going to be working for white people all of our life. We want to get an education. We want to be able to go into fields that we want to go into. We don't want our whole existence to be based on doing what white people want us to do. All right. And what Dick Gregory's conclusion is the conclusion that most people have come to now to understand, because it was 2 schools of thought. And that was, in certain ways, they were both right. It would have been nice had they come together and made a compromise on their thought process. Okay. And so Black people would have a plan of creating an economic base, and then also making sure that you have the education that you need to go into certain industries to do more than just the basic work. All right. So in my mindset, they were both right to some degree. But if you look at what is happening with the Black community, okay, and most people will say that the ideology of the talented 10th took hold more so than what Booker T. Washington was trying to say. And so now we have what is called the Black bourgeoisie. And so when we come back, I'm actually gonna read an article that was written that talks about the Black bourgeoisie in detail, who they were initially, what they thought about life, and you'll be able to see whether or not you know people who have the Black bourgeoisie mindset. And that mindset became, if I cause 10% of Black Americans to rise to a certain level, that 10% is supposed to go back and help pull up the 90%. Well, we see after many years that is not working. Okay. Part of the reason why it's not working is because a lot of the people who are part of the Black bourgeoisie don't have a community mindset anymore. They have this is mine, this is what I earned, I'm not helping anybody. Oh, well, they didn't make it, it's their problem. All right. So the whole notion of what W.E.B. was trying to build with his philosophy, okay, we see how it's not coming to fruition, because you have to have people who understand. You have to have people in the 10% who understand that a part of their responsibility when they get up in the 10% is to help the 90%. All right. Rather than say, oh, well, it's their problem. These are you're seeing these arguments where people that are considered a part of the Black bourgeoisie, some of them are even distancing themselves from even being Black. That's where all of that's coming from. I'm not Black. I'm Caucasian. Okay. Anything but Black. And we know with the African American community, when you start doing stuff like that, they start saying, hey, you don't want to be a part of us? Then, we'll trade you for Eminem. I heard somebody say that one time. We don't want Simone because she's acting like she's telling people she's not Black. All right. We'll trade her for Eminem, because at least Eminem acknowledges African American people and the issues of African Americans. So you start seeing, now you're starting to see the mindset of the 10% and what has really happened to them. Once they have elevated, have they forgotten what the whole point of being a part of the Black bourgeoisie was supposed to be about in the first place? It wasn't just about getting your paper. It was supposed to be about, once I get to a place economically, then I'm going to reach back and I'm going to help people from my community come up. So that was the theory behind W.E.B. Du Bois' work. Let me keep going. All right. Dick Gregory says something here about the murder of Emmett Till and Rosa Parks and the Montgomery bus boycott. And I want to read this section to you all. He says, now they say Rosa Parks was the spark of the civil rights movement, but I'll tell you who sparked Rosa Parks. And this is actually historically true and documented. I actually saw it in the new museum. If you get a chance, if you're in the DC area and you get a chance to go to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, please go. The tickets, I believe, are still free. You just have to go to the website and order your tickets online, and they give you a printout of them, and then the printout will either tell you if there is a time frame on when you can go, like sometimes it's a 2-hour block, or whether or not your ticket is an all-day ticket. And so if you get an all-day ticket, I encourage you to take the entire day to go view the museum. It literally took us, the last time we went, we had an all-day ticket, and we spent the entire time from 10 a.m. to the close of the museum to go through everything, and we still didn't see everything. All right. So what he's going to talk about here is actually, they have an Emmett Till memorial room inside of the museum, and when you go in there, it is very powerful and impactful. You can actually, I was telling somebody, the sorrow in the room is tangible. All right. And it's a very, very, very important piece of the museum. So if you do go, make sure you check that out. So who sparked Rosa Parks? Emmett Till's mama, Mamie. Emmett Till was a 14-year-old boy, black boy from Chicago, who went to see some relatives in a little town in Mississippi in 1955. The name of the town was Money. Now, isn't that something? It's as if folks wanted to name the town after the thing they cared about the most, but they couldn't call the town Killing Negroes, so they had to settle for the next best thing. One day, Emmett was in a store in the town, and they said that he looked at and whistled at a 21-year-old white woman, or so they said. They called it reckless eyeballing. Boy, what did he do that for? Couple of days later, the woman's husband and the husband's half-brother went to where Emmett was staying and kidnapped him. What did they do to that poor boy? It'd be quicker to tell you what they didn't do. When they ran out of ways to torture him, they shot him and threw his body in the Tallahatchie River. After Emmett's body was pulled from the river and sent back to Chicago for the funeral, that was when Mamie Till gave the world the shock it needed. She insisted on having an open casket funeral service so the world could see that what those men had done to her boy. The men who got away with it and then later admitted they'd done it. So many thousands of people attended that funeral and saw Emmett's body. A whole bunch of people fainted, and a whole bunch more needed smelling salts. And with good reason. Ever seen a monster movie or a zombie movie? I'm telling you, the Oscar-winningest makeup man in Hollywood couldn't make something look like that boy looked in his casket. Then John H. Johnson published photos of Emmett Till's face in Jet magazine, and then the world saw it, including Rosa Parks. Now, in case you didn't know, the woman who got Emmett Till killed recently is putting out a book. And in her interview, apparently, she admits that Emmett Till didn't do anything. And so now people are calling for this woman to be arrested and criminally charged in some way for this boy's murder. Because here it is, she's a free woman. Now she's admitting that he didn't do anything, and she has a book deal. But hey, this is America. Think about that. So Dick Gregory says, one day I was talking to Rosa Parks and I said to her, just teasing her, when you refused to give up your seat on that bus, you weren't just tired like white folks said you were. She started crying, and I couldn't believe the answer she gave me. Martin Luther King Jr., who gets all the credit for everything, was just an earnest Baptist preacher. His consciousness came from the white schools he went to, and he had that twang that Baptist preachers have that white folks can't understand. That's why all we ever heard of him on the TV networks were sound bites, going to the mountaintop, and the rest of that stuff you hear year in and year out on his birthday. But think about Rosa Parks and the effect she had on the whole planet. She didn't have a church behind her like King did, but look at what she did. When she refused to give up her bus seat to a white man and got arrested for it, black and white folks rallied around her. The day that I spoke to her, we were just kicking back, having dinner at a hotel. I was only playing when I said, look at your pretty feet. and they wanted to say you wouldn't give up your seat because you were tired. Think about it. White people try to say that if Rosa hadn't been too tired to get up from her seat that day, none of it would have ever happened. Everything that sparked the civil rights movement, that's what we let historians get away with. I said to her, "You tell me what happened." And when she did, she caught me by surprise. She sounded almost like she was in a trance. She said, "I just couldn't get Emmett Till off my mind." Rosa was born in 1913 in Tuskegee, Alabama. Her daddy was one angry man because he wanted to be a Garveyite. Garveyites were those black folks who followed Marcus Garvey, a Jamaican-born black nationalist who advocated Pan-Africanism and the economic and political empowerment of blacks. But Marcus Garvey didn't accept light-skinned black people, and Rosa's dad was one. So instead, he had to make do with sitting on his porch with his double-barrel shotgun, daring white folks to mess with him. At the time of the bus incident, Rosa was a secretary for the Montgomery chapter of the NAACP. White folks like to say she was just some tired housewife who didn't want to stand up on the bus that day, but she was no less an activist than Martin Luther King Jr. In Montgomery, Alabama, where it happened, Negroes had to sit at the back of the bus behind the white people. But here's one thing I didn't know, and they actually show this on the film about the story of Rosa Parks, which I believe is played by Angela Bassett, I believe. Okay, they actually show this in the movie. They had to get on the bus at the front door to pay their fare. Then they had to get off the bus and walk to the back door to get on. All right, because remember, their seating was at the back of the bus. So you could go on the front to pay, but you had to get back off the bus, walk to the back door, and then get on in that section. When black folks got on at the back, they might find white boys in the back flirting with the black sisters. And most of those women would be flirting back, smiling and saying, "Oh, come on, you don't mean it." But not Rosa Parks. She didn't play that mess. When the white boys tried flirting with her, she'd say, "Don't you ever say that to me again." Also, if you were black and you were sitting in the last row of seats reserved for white people, and a white person wanted to sit down in that row in your seat, then the 3 other black people in the same row also had to get up too. It wasn't just one seat involved. That was segregation for you. Anyway, a couple of times when Rosa got off the bus to walk to the back door after paying her fare up front, the driver would drive off and leave her. One driver in particular. When she was describing that famous day to me, Rosa said, "Had I known that was him," meaning the driver who had given her trouble before, "I wouldn't have got on that bus." But that's the universe at work. So there's Rosa sitting in the first row of the colored section when a white guy gets on and there are no free seats in the white section. Later, this man would say, "We were getting off in a couple of stops." So he wasn't the one trying to make Rosa Parks give up her seat. He figured it wasn't worth the trouble. But the bus driver, the same one Rosa wanted to avoid, went back there and called her a niggerbitch and told her to get up. But Rosa wasn't having it. She wasn't just tired, she was mad as heck because she was thinking about Emmett Till. So, that's what happened. The Montgomery bus boycott. Today, you've got cops killing black people over nothing just because they're black. Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Sandra Bland, too many more to name. Black children, husbands, every now and then a black woman, and some black activists are trying to do something, but a lot of black people don't care because they're scared. There's a way to fight back, though, if we would just organize and think about one word. And most people are coming to their senses and they're already practicing this. But I've been practicing it for a while. But some of us are catching on. Hope that's not too artistic so you guys can read it. Retail. Retail. Think about one word, retail. Listen to what he says. 1/3 of all retail sales happen between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Did y'all hear that? Listen. Listen now. 1/3 of all retail sales that help a business balance out. And if you've been in retail, you know this is true. My mother worked in retail for a while, and they had to make up loss during the holidays so their books would balance. So I know he's telling the truth on this. 1/3 of all retail sales happen between Thanksgiving and Christmas. In other words, in 1 month, businesses make 1/3 of all the money they make all year long. Now, unless your daddy's a businessman, you probably didn't know that. But now you know. So if we all said, ALL, if we all said, because of these black people being killed, we are calling for a boycott from Thanksgiving through Christmas of any business that has been silent, that has been in support of, that has been acting like they do not see what is going on, we will not be buying from those businesses. If we did that, we would be heard. And we have taken this kind of action in the past. What am I talking about? Down south in the 1950s, the bus boycotts. It started in Montgomery, Alabama in 1955. Everybody knows Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus in Montgomery. That sparked the bus boycotts. But what some people forget is this. The reason the boycotts worked was because the buses were a business. And when they couldn't get black folks money, they were brought to their knees. We black folks got sick of paying our money for the privilege of being abused and disrespected by all white drivers and being told where we could and could not sit. Martin Luther King organized the boycott hoping that at least 60% of black people would participate. Instead, 90 to about 98% of us did, because we had had enough. And when you get fed up for real, you'll actually come together and do something about it. Black folks got together and said, no more. And it worked. The bus company gave in to our demands. Then the boycott spread to other cities. That's what we need to do today. The Montgomery bus boycott went on for 381 days, over a year. But I'm only talking about boycotting businesses for 1 month. We've got to decide what we want. Do we want to protect our sons and daughters and husbands and wives and mothers? Or do we want to spend money we don't have on stupid toys with people who disrespect us? Seems like the answer is pretty clear to me. Do we want our kids to grow up safe? Or do we want to freeze our behinds off waiting for stores to open on Black Friday and then trample one another to death trying to get a pair of sneakers in the spirit of Christmas? It's up to us. We all know it would be easier on us all around to just not shop because we know that we don't have the money. We can say it is for a good reason. We can protest police brutality. We can shop with those who respect us. We can shop with our own black business and retailers. But we have to make a decision. So, this has been another episode of Daring Dialogues. I am your host, Shantae Charles. I hope that I have given you something to think about on today, something to research, something to screenshot, something to keep in your mind. All right. And you've never done Black Friday. Neither have I. I'm not that kind of shop person, but I would say probably for the past 3 years, I have really tried to, anytime I'm shopping, I've really tried to gear my buying toward Black businesses first. Okay. And I hear a lot of excuses as to why people are not doing that. But I'm going to give you 2 companies that you can check out that have goods and services that you can shop in. One is year round and the other one is a holiday catalog. So let me see. You can look up both of these. One is an organization company called WeBuyBlack.com. Okay. And this has several hundred businesses in it, that and all of the products are in different categories. So whatever you're looking for, you can go on that site, click on the category and find a business to support. All right. So we have to learn to not be at the mercy of people who think that you have to buy from them. No, sir. No, ma'am. I do not. All right. And so if I can't find it from a Black owned business who gives me the same quality as any other business, then I go and look at a second option. But usually I am trying to buy Black first. And let me tell you, every other ethnic group does this. And nobody looks at them sideways. Nobody gives them the side eye when they're supporting their own. All right. And the other one is the Black Business Catalog. Black Business Catalog. All right. So check out these 2 if you are interested in looking for businesses to support. And guess what? You don't have to be Black to support Black business. I have several friends who are not Black who are always inboxing me to say, hey, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. Do you know a Black business I can support? And I happily give them a link. So it's a mindset. And some of us, we got to get to the point where we are renewing our mind and changing our mind about how we think about business, economy, health, building, and development. I am over my time, so let me stop talking. All right. So again, I want to thank you for your time and attention today. I encourage you, like I said, to please go out and get this seminal work by Dick Gregory. He ends this book with a very powerful question. He says, his epilogue has to do with white supremacy. And the question that he says is this. Where is it? He said, Blacks and whites have similar emotional brain activity when seeing African Americans. Both Black people and white people, 63% of them fear the image of an African American. This is a scientific finding. Now, how do we start undoing that? So, get the book, get the book, get the book. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So please go out and be light today. Somebody needs your light, so shine. Take care and God bless. And thank you for watching on my YouTube live stream. Please make sure that you share this broadcast. Thank you again. Take care and God bless.